Let me do a brief breakdown of the entire journey. It's the next day after I arrived yesterday. I cannot believe I've actually achieved it. I've visualized so much of the journey for so many months, and driving into my garden was just so surreal. But there's been a hell of a lot of planning that's gone into this. It's been, let's look at the stats. It's been 3,613 kilometers, 2,258 miles since Armenia to the Channel Tunnel, and just from Burgas, from the Black Sea, was 2,896, call it 2,900 kilometers, 1,800 miles. And I did that from Thursday afternoon to Monday morning. And that has been 11 days, 10 countries, 8 languages, 6 currencies, and 6 border crossings where there's been a kind of an official procedure. It's hard to put all that into words because it just becomes your life. You're just on the road and it's just your life. Just shows you what you can achieve. Within 4 days, you could get to the Black Sea from the UK. Because I'd had time off work, I really prioritised the journey, moving on the journey. So I didn't do any sightseeing or whatsoever. You do wonder, think, oh, I've been to Georgia. I'm only here for 2 days. Should I go and do something? Go and take a detour and see something? But I really didn't want to start getting into, with an unknown vehicle, an untested vehicle. I didn't want to start going into the mountains, doing some off-roading, and then you have a problem, and then you miss the ferry. And I really didn't prioritise that at all. It was just purely A to B as fast as possible. I also didn't have a co-driver. It was a bit short notice. I didn't really want to offer to people, hey, do you want to come and use some of your annual leave and sit in a car with me for several days? I could have potentially had someone fly out or pay for someone to fly out to Bulgaria and pick them up and do the last 4 days, as it turned out. But I just thought, because it was relatively short notice, I'll just do the thing myself. It would have been nice to have a co-driver. I don't think I could have gone any further. It just would have made it a bit more relaxing. The vehicle, the way it is, I was comfortable driving this vehicle with the poor brakes and the difficult gear changes and the transmission noise and sticking to my 90 km/h speed limit because I have experience with Defenders. I'm happy with this vehicle being very cautious. Putting it in the hands of somebody that may not necessarily have known Defenders as well could have been a bit of an unknown. I wouldn't have wanted to burden with someone with that necessarily. About the vehicle, the black smoke has mostly disappeared. So it was, I think, altitude and potentially poor quality fuel. It doesn't really smoke any more or less than I would expect for the vehicle. Rest of the World Spec 300 TDIs do have a different tune or a different setting on the fuel injection pumps than my 97 Defender. So it's probably potentially a bit more smoky than you would otherwise get for the benefit of whatever reliability or power or economy or whatever the setting was set for from the factory. So maybe it does have a higher smoke limit, but I don't think it's unduly smoky compared to what it was in Armenia. It was pretty smoky there. The steering wheel here, funnily enough, coming into Northern Europe, it stopped getting really sticky. It must have been ambient temperature. If it's over 30 degrees, the steering wheel just exudes this kind of gel and goo, and it just ended up, your hands were just sticky and covered in black stuff from the beginning of the day to the end. It's partly why I just wore the same shorts throughout, because I was just wiping my hands down on my shorts the whole time because it was just disgusting. But that seems to have changed now, and it just feels like a normal steering wheel, but it's pretty warm. This seat and the other one, they've been retrimmed. They're not the original. It's not the original seat base. They've been retrimmed, and the foam in them is just kind of generic foam. It really shows you what goes into, the comfort of designing seats. But I thought about swapping the seat bases. But I basically bruised my arse bone, and it was so uncomfortable for several days. Just you couldn't find the right position. That was really uncomfortable. So I'm going to get these like proper seat foam put into these. It's just, imagine if you put like a thick wodge of open cell foam on a park bench and sat on it, you'd be able to feel the park bench pretty quickly. It's kind of like that. And same, I was getting a bit of knee discomfort, here from the accelerator pedal, because this bit, you see that takes quite a bit of extra space up this armouring. So your foot is kind of in here. You can't move it anymore to the side. You can't go any further left, really. So the amount of positions I could put my foot in were quite limited, so that was quite uncomfortable for quite a few days. The clutch pedal and brakes also got better when I got into Northern Europe and the cooler temperatures, so it's definitely temperature related. The gear changes were better towards the end of the journey. Reverse is still very hard to get into. So it's funny, like when you're moving, I mean, it feels all right. It's not so much notchy, it's just the git. I feel it now. That's second. You can feel like it's rough on the way in and out. Fifth is probably the least used gear out of the lot, and that feels all right. But I think I'll change the fluids and see if that makes any difference. The transmission noise was really worrying. I kind of got desensitized to it in the end, and because it didn't really change. There was noise on overrun, there was noise on power, there was noise. It got worse up to 80 kilometers an hour, but after about 60 or so, the tires drown it out. So it's just incredibly noisy. The moment I went over like 91 kilometers an hour, I'd get a grinding noise, which is, and I think the grinding noise that happens at low speed, under sort of 15 kilometers an hour, is all UJ related. I'm fairly certain it's the rear one at the diff end, because that's the one I couldn't get much grease into, or only one cup with square grease. So I think the UJs account for a lot of the noise. However, the front, and I'm going to do the bearing on the front output housing on the transfer box, and that'll potentially be the sort of an EastEnders noise, but with bearings, as you're sort of in that cruise phase and you get the kind of the kangarooing, you get this whining that comes in and out, and if it's not that bearing, I'll be interested in what it is. So I'm hoping it's more that bearing than the entire gearbox that's being a problem. I think the synchros are fairly worn though, because it's run for quite a while with very low clutch pedal, and the oil was probably very old. In terms of economy, let me just look at my stats. Fuel economy average for this vehicle over that entire distance was 30.2 miles to the gallon, British gallon, and I'll put the kilometres on the screen, but it's less than 10 litres per 100 kilometres, which I think is pretty good. The best I had was 32, and that was through Bulgaria and then up over the mountains. I was getting 31 and 30 in Armenia and Georgia, and then pretty much 29 and a half through the highways of Europe, pretty much. So a lot of that would be to do with the roof rack. I was driving at the most economical speeds, but the roof rack would have had a big impact. Would have had a big impact, and tyres as well. They're mud tyres. That would have played a part. The border crossings went better than I expected. A lot of them were a lot quicker. So Armenia to Georgia only took half an hour. Getting out of Georgia on the ferry. So I've done a full write-up of the ferry process and everything there on my website. The link is down below. Getting out of Georgia, they read the entire power of attorney document, and then getting into Burgas took several hours. Quite a long process that. Bulgaria into Romania, they checked they saw the vehicle, and they got me to open the back, and they said, "Have you got any alcohol or cigarettes?" I said no, and they were quite happy with that. They asked for the power of attorney there, and I gave it to them when they saw the technical passport, and then I went on from there. Romania into Hungary, I gave them the power of attorney, so they just checked that, and it was a formality, but the queue there was quite long. It was about half an hour of queue. Hungary into Austria, there was a police check where you had to sort of slow down, and people would go through, and then when he saw me, he just sort of went like this and flagged me down, and I gave him the passport and the technical passport and the power of attorney, and he was just a bit more surprised that there was an Armenian vehicle being driven by a British person. And then Austria into Germany, there was like a police checkpoint where you slowed down. Coming the other way, it was horrendous, but going my way, it was like it looked like roadworks. It looked like it was temporary, and you would slow down, and then there was just a policeman standing there, and you drive really slow, and he didn't flag me down, so I carried on. And the rest of it was just formality, really, Schengen. And then France, getting out of France, you just show the passport, no problem. And then there's the British side, show your passport, no problem. and carry on at the Channel Tunnel. They didn't ask anything about the vehicle. So went very smoothly, and that power of attorney document, which I'd never heard of a power of attorney in terms of a vehicle before. I always just assumed it was, from person to person. Worked very well, went down very well. My speed limit was 90 kilometers an hour indicated. It's probably about 84 on the GPS. I stuck to that rigidly because there was a horrendous noise, as I was getting to 92. I could feel that through the floor. It was less of a noise, more of a vibration, and it wasn't steering vibration, which there is some steering vibration at certain speeds, and particularly in the morning. It was mostly vibration. I could feel it through the floor. It was like a grrr, not just a bit of vibration, but real grinding. So that really kept my speed low. So I didn't really ever go over 90 indicated. It was very consistent. I did, 13-hour days of about 11 to 11 and a half hours driving through the highways of Europe. So very slow, but I'd like to think very consistent. A lot of the speed limits in roadworks in Germany and Austria are 80 kilometers an hour. So it didn't really affect my average speed. I was driving about the same speed that I would have done anyway. My general philosophy was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I was listening out for noises or changes in noises. My thinking was, if this vehicle had been used as a fleet vehicle until very recently, and it had these noises and people were just using it, and these noises don't come on overnight. They would have come on probably from lack of oil changes over thousands of kilometers. My thinking was that, well, it's not going to probably fail suddenly if it had been working for thousands of kilometers. So I was going to live with the noises, and I did. You kind of got used to them by the end. I think sticking to my speed limit, i.e. not going above the speed that it probably has driven for most of its life, I think was warranted, and I'm pleased I stuck to that. There is a temptation to just go a bit further, like, oh, it's a really good motorway, and people are whipping past you at certain speeds, and if I drive, I might knock off a couple of hours and get to the hotel sooner. But I rigidly stuck to it, and I think it paid off. I did build up a low coolant alarm circuit and system that I was planning to fit with the sensor, which would have been the radiator cap with the sensor from my other Defender that I brought. I decided not to fit it, even though the coolant pipes are the original ones. They're 17 years old. My theory goes that the burst pipe is probably due to the radiator cap. If you get a leak from, let's say, the head gasket or something like that, they're usually quite slight. So if you drop coolant, you can manage it. The other leaks could be the radiator. Radiator's in good condition. I did have my 200 TDI 15 years ago. The radiator burst because I'd kind of clogged it a bit with mud, and I was driving really hard in the hottest day of the year in the UK, and the radiator sprung a leak. I didn't think that was going to happen with this one. But the pipes I was worried about. Now the thing about the pipes is either the radiator cap doesn't vent pressure, and the pressure builds up, and then the weakest part of the system will burst, which is probably one of the pipes. Or the radiator cap vents all the pressure, in which case the coolant boils at 100 degrees and not like 115 or 120, which is what the pressure gives you. So the coolant starts boiling, and then it vents steam, and you lose your coolant from venting that. So from my perspective, it's been running with that radiator cap. It's been running in incredibly hot ambient temperatures, and the cooling system has been working, and I kept verifying that, and the coolant didn't drop. My theory was that radiator cap for this system is working, leave it on there, and I shouldn't have any problems with a working cooling system. And it was exonerated. So my planning was to fit the system. I would have had this horrendous mess of wires and sort of bodgery going on all around. The other thing was that if I get to the end of the day, trying to fit the wires, I've got to have to feed the wires down into the gearbox, and everything was so hot, you end up burning yourself on the underside. I was really reluctant to start messing around with things, but it worked out in the end. That philosophy worked out, not pushing it too hard. Where the philosophy didn't work out was the screw on the back tyre, where I looked at it and said, well, it's not leaking at the moment, let's not disturb it. I did have a belief that, the tyres would wear down, and eventually it would wear down and get pushed in and puncture. I didn't think it would happen in the course of the journey, but it did. It happened, it only took about 3,500 kilometres, and the screw head is completely worn down, and it caused a puncture, albeit towards the end of the journey and in the UK, where I know the system and I can deal with stuff. So that philosophy, probably I should have elected to try and get the tyre fixed at some point. It's not a particularly difficult thing to get fixed. Lots of places fix tyres. That's the other side of the coin. I think I was most worried about transmission, and if I was going to get work done on the vehicle by a third party, it probably would have been UJs on the prop shafts. The tyre, once I'd set off, the tyre had really gone out of my mind, and I was focusing more on UJs, transmission noises, that kind of stuff, and cooling system were my main worries. So interesting there, flip side of the coin being like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, where actually it caused the failure in the end, but it only delayed me for about an hour. But I'm very grateful that that didn't cause a problem in a more challenging part of Europe. Using Google Maps was a real godsend. I can't imagine, I mean, I just remember, 15 years ago when Google Maps didn't really exist or wasn't very reliable. Navigating by yourself, you had paper maps, I'd write out my route on paper, I'd have the paper there, you're following road signs and you're looking. Google Maps is invaluable because the road junction design in parts of Europe compared to what we have in the UK is completely different. I would say illogical. So German junctions like to have a clover leaf pattern. From a road user perspective, you're on a long highway and you want to go that way. You have to come off the slip road, then you have to go to the left because the slip road going further that way goes off that way. You come to the left, then there's all the traffic coming on to that slip road, so you have to cross traffic into another slip road because they want to come on and carry on the slip road to carry on the route you have been taking. Then you do a 270-degree corner and then you come back on the highway going that way. So if you come off the slip road from the road you're on and you don't pay attention, you'll just come straight back on to the road you've just been on. So you've really got to pay attention. And even with Google, it's sometimes quite confusing. But Google Maps on the whole did very well for the whole journey. Georgia is when it got a bit muddled up just because it doesn't know which roads are closed, and it took me a lot longer to navigate around Batumi. But the main gripe is the fact that it doesn't change, it doesn't recalculate the journey time or your expected arrival time based on your current average speed or your real rolling average speed. It just does it off the general average speed of all road users. So that's my pet peeve with Google Maps. But on the whole, it was incredible resource that we have these days, and it really made the difference. I was quite fortunate as well that it being July, there's very long days, so I got a lot of daylight and driving time, but also that most of the traffic was heading south in the summer holidays. So I had quite good traffic going north, only a little bit in Germany. And the road quality is generally pretty good. Romania and Bulgaria probably, as expected, had the worst quality. It's usually, highways, tram lines in the roads and rough tarmac that's not been repaired. Once you get to Hungary, smooth as you like. Austria, Germany, and then there's quite a lot of roadworks as well. What are the next steps? Well, I need to technically import this Defender into the UK. I need to get the MOT done as part of that. So I'm going to have to do some work. I'll probably have to change the shock absorbers. I need to sort out the steering box that leaks. So I've bought a second-hand steering box, left-hand drive one. I may take the seals out of that, see what the shaft's like and replace the seals, but I'm going to have to deal with the leaks. Just check out all the usual stuff. The electrics are all fine. I've got to fix the headlights though, because the headlight switch is melted. Yeah, I'm hoping that maybe some bushes, but I'm hoping it should be okay for the MOT. I've just got to get it MOT'd and talk to the garage being like, it's not got a UK number plate. I can't book it on your website. How are you going to do this? From there, restore it, rehabilitate it, and I'm now an owner of 3 vehicles, so I probably need to buy another tent to put this one on, take the roof rack off, and we'll go from there. Still a lot of work to go and many, many years of projects ahead of me, but that's exciting, right? Right, thanks for watching. Bye for now.